The Ford has several platforms. First, it's a first-class presidential museum in Grand Rapids that's not just a mausoleum, but a temple to our constitutional republic. Second, it's a presidential library in Ann Arbor on the North Campus of the University of Michigan, the seedbed of insightful books and studies about President Ford, his leadership, his achievements. Third, it's the DeVos Learning Center for K-12 students who come with their teachers from all over Michigan and all over the Midwest to learn about civics, government, citizenship, and leadership. They come to grow. Fourth, it's the Ford Leadership Forum for college students and young professionals who come to Grand Rapids from all around the nation and who are still in moral and intellectual formation. And fifth, it's the Ford Presidential Foundation, which is the platform that I am privileged to serve and whose purpose is to support and grow all the other platforms. Our mission, the golden thread that runs through all these platforms, is to inspire excellence in the American character. Our audience is students, citizens in the making, and leaders at every stage of development. The DeVos Learning Center and Ford Leadership Forum, for example, hold up the example of the good life to our young people. We want to help shape their imagination, to see how they can grow into their potential, to see how the pursuit of happiness is integral to a life with meaning and purpose, in service to others and community, a life of leading when called to do so, just as President Ford lived. The umbrella over all this are the lives, values, and virtues of America's 38th President, Gerald R. Ford, and First Lady Betty Ford. Most Americans do not see Gerald Ford as a great president, but the more they learn about him, the more they understand that he was a great human being, and that's better. He had integrity. He had courage. He was true to his word. He was compassionate. He was loyal. His instincts were to unify, not divide. Ford was an institutionalist who knew when to buck the institution. It's important to see Gerald Ford as more than a politician. He lived a meaningful life in the biggest sense of the word, a life of untiring service, virtue-anchored leadership, and inspired citizenship. Whether he was House Minority Leader, Vice President, or President, Gerald Ford looked beyond the next election to the next generation. He knew our youth may be only 25% of our population, but they are 100% of our future, so we've got to get it right. If you study Ford's speeches, his swearing in 1974, Pearl Harbor in 75, Valley Forge in 76, you see how deeply concerned the president was to preserve America's experiment in ordered liberty. A World War II veteran himself, he knew that civilization and international order could not be taken for granted. Every generation has to re-earn the blessings of liberty. When I take people through the museum, what strikes them are the virtues by which President and Mrs. Ford lived. They were virtue-anchored people who put service before self. Our campus on the Grand River offers a vivid illustration of what drove President Ford to a life of leadership and service. On one side are modern skyscrapers that rise above a thriving Grand Rapids. On the other side are ancient Native American mounds, burial mounds, the remnants of a people most of whose culture disappeared long ago. President Ford asked a simple question when I interviewed him in 2005. Aren't we obligated to future generations to do whatever we can to be strong and prosperous instead of weak and powerless? In these hyper-partisan and challenging times, we need to rededicate ourselves to our better angels and to a more perfect union. And there is no better way than through the cultivation of virtue. In this and in many other ways, President Ford sets the bar high for the rest of us. In our private and public roles, we should live a life of integrity. In our communities, we should help others live their best life. In our politics, we should be able to disagree without being disagreeable and still find principled common ground for the greater good. In our communities, we should be the bearers of truth, goodness, and beauty. Mrs. Ford saved the lives of countless women and men. She had the courage to stare down her demons. President and Mrs. Ford were very different people, but they shared the same values. He, on the one hand, was a little bit stodgy and conservative. She, on the other hand, was very lively and more liberal. They were in a marriage. We know that marriage is hard. Every morning we get up, we husbands and wives, and we say, okay, we can do better tomorrow. President and Mrs. Ford got up with the same attitude. We're different, but we can do better together. And that's a great metaphor for the American people. We are a family. We need to make it work. Here at the Ford Presidential Foundation, we're working hard for you to make sure this democratic experiment works.